What really happens to women in men's prisons? The truth will shock you. What would you do if you were a woman placed in a prison meant for men? Behind those walls lie stories of unimaginable struggles, systemic failures, and heartbreaking realities. Today we uncover the truth about women in male prisons, stories that will shock and move you, here on Fledgling Eagle. The misplaced girl in Brazil. In 2007, a young girl in Brazil was arrested for a minor offense, trespassing on private property. Instead of being placed in a juvenile detention center or another appropriate facility for girls, she was shockingly sent to a male detention center, an act that exposed her to severe risks. This decision disregarded her age, gender, and basic rights, placing her in a highly unsafe environment. Once there, she was subjected to a host of indignities and neglect. Reports revealed that she was denied adequate food, access to personal hygiene products, and proper clothing. She was isolated from her family, with authorities obstructing her father's repeated attempts to contact or visit her. Her father's pleas were met with resistance, as officials twisted facts and made dubious claims to justify her placement. The girl's experience in the detention center went far beyond negligence. It was emblematic of systemic failures within Brazil's justice system. Witness accounts suggested that she endured verbal harassment and threats from the male detainees. The ordeal came to light only because of a courageous whistleblower who exposed the shocking truth to the media. The whistleblower's revelations triggered widespread outrage, drawing attention to the inhumane treatment faced by many juveniles in detention. While her story sparked temporary public outcry and calls for reform, meaningful justice has yet to be served. Sadly, cases like hers highlight the persistent failures in protecting vulnerable individuals, especially young women, in detention centers worldwide. Was her suffering the result of gross incompetence, or was it a calculated act of neglect within a broken system? Vicky Thompson's heartbreaking journey. Vicky Thompson, a transgender woman from England, lived a life marked by struggles for acceptance, recognition, and basic dignity. From a young age, Vicky faced relentless bullying due to her gender identity, which left deep emotional scars that she carried into adulthood. Despite these challenges, she remained determined to live authentically as a woman. However, society's systemic barriers and prejudices continued to shape her life, culminating in a series of events that would tragically end in her untimely death. In 2015, Vicky was arrested for a minor parole violation. What followed was a decision that would seal her fate. Despite being legally recognized as a woman, she was sent to a men's prison. Her pleas to be transferred to a women's facility were ignored, with authorities citing outdated policies and a lack of proper protocols to address transgender inmates' needs. This decision not only disregarded her identity, but placed her in an environment fraught with danger, hostility, and discrimination. From the moment she arrived at the prison, Vicky became a target for harassment. Male inmates subjected her to constant verbal abuse, using hateful slurs and mocking her gender identity. Some even made explicit and threatening demands, further compounding her distress. The prison environment, notorious for its lack of safeguards for vulnerable individuals, offered her no reprieve. Vicky's mental health rapidly deteriorated, exacerbated by the isolation and fear she endured daily. She had repeatedly warned authorities that she would not survive in a men's prison, but her cries for help went unanswered. Within days of her incarceration, Vicky took her own life. While her death was officially ruled a suicide, advocates and experts argue that it was the direct result of systemic negligence and institutional transphobia. Her passing sent shockwaves through the UK, igniting widespread outrage and a national conversation about the treatment of transgender individuals in the prison system. To this day, Vicky's legacy serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of institutional neglect. Her story is a call to action, a plea for empathy, inclusivity, and reform to ensure that no one else is forced to endure the suffering she faced. Only by addressing these systemic issues can society hope to create a justice system that truly upholds the dignity and safety of all individuals. A terrifying ordeal in Para, Brazil. In Para, Brazil, a woman seeking employment found herself trapped in a nightmare that highlighted severe flaws in the country's justice system. Desperate for work, she accepted a job offer, only to discover it was a ruse that led to her abduction. Shockingly, her captors placed her in a male detention center, infamous for being a lawless environment where inmates held significant control over daily operations. Forced to wear a prisoner's uniform, she became a target of relentless physical and emotional abuse. Isolated and without any form of protection or advocacy, she endured unimaginable trauma at the hands of the inmates. Her ordeal came to an end when she made a daring escape, fleeing through dense forest to reach safety. However, her suffering raised urgent questions about the systemic failures that allowed such a blatant breach of human rights to occur. How could a civilian woman, unaffiliated with the criminal justice system, end up in such a facility? Why were there no safeguards to prevent such gross misconduct? This case not only sheds light on the vulnerability of women in precarious situations, but also calls attention to the unchecked corruption and lack of oversight within detention centers in Brazil. Her story is a chilling reminder of the urgent need for reforms to protect the rights and safety of all individuals, particularly the most vulnerable. Are mixed-gender prisons an opportunity or a risk? The concept of mixed-gender prisons has sparked intense debate worldwide. On one hand, proponents argue that integrating male and female inmates in the same facility can foster mutual understanding and personal growth. For example, a male prisoner, through interactions with female inmates, might gain insights into how his past actions have affected others, potentially encouraging rehabilitation. The shared environment could serve as a platform for dialogue, empathy, and the development of healthier perspectives. In countries with progressive penal systems, advocates suggest that mixed-gender facilities could create a more balanced atmosphere, reducing tensions that often arise in single-gender prisons. However, the risks associated with mixed-gender prisons are significant and cannot be ignored. These facilities often lack the resources and protocols necessary to prevent harassment, exploitation, and abuse. Vulnerable individuals, particularly women, may face heightened risks of violence, coercion, and discrimination. Critics also point out that insufficient staffing and inadequate training for prison personnel exacerbate these issues, making it difficult to ensure the safety and well-being of inmates. Additionally, the power dynamics inherent in such environments could create further challenges, as women may be marginalized or silenced within a predominantly male-dominated setting. The debate ultimately comes down to a balance of potential benefits versus the risks involved. While the idea of fostering mutual understanding and rehabilitation is compelling, the safety and dignity of all inmates must remain the top priority. Without stringent safeguards, adequate resources, and comprehensive staff training, the dangers of mixed-gender prisons may outweigh their advantages. Should prison systems embrace this model, or are the inherent risks too great to justify the experiment? The legacy of Carandiru Prison. In stark contrast to traditional prisons, Norway's Bastøy prison offers a groundbreaking model of rehabilitation and humane incarceration. Located on a serene island in the Oslo fjord, Bastøy houses its inmates in shared cottages rather than cells. Instead of rigid routines and harsh punishment, prisoners are encouraged to take responsibility for their lives. They cook their own meals, tend to gardens, and participate in vocational training programs including farming, woodworking, and mechanics. This unique approach is rooted in Norway's philosophy that the primary goal of incarceration should be rehabilitation, not retribution. By providing an environment that mirrors real-world responsibilities, Bastøy aims to prepare inmates for life after prison. Education programs, counseling, and opportunities for personal growth are integral to the system. The results speak for themselves. Norway boasts one of the lowest recidivism rates globally, with only 16% of former inmates reoffending compared to much higher rates in countries with harsher systems. Critics argue that such a model might not work in countries with larger or more diverse populations, where cultural attitudes toward punishment and resources for rehabilitation differ. However, Bastoy's success raises important questions. Should the world rethink its approach to incarceration? Is it time to shift the focus from punishment to rehabilitation, prioritizing reintegration over retribution? While implementing such reforms on a global scale may be challenging, Bastoy serves as an inspiring example of what's possible when prisons prioritize humanity over hostility. Norway's Bastoy Prison, a radical approach. Carandiru Prison in São Paulo, Brazil, is remembered as one of the darkest chapters in the history of the global penal system. Built in 1920, the facility was originally intended to hold around 3,500 inmates, but by the late 20th century, it housed over 8,000, a staggering example of overcrowding and neglect. Conditions within the prison were dire. Insufficient food, lack of medical care, and rampant violence defined daily life. Tensions reached a breaking point in October 1992, when a violent riot erupted within the prison walls. The military police were called in to quell the unrest, but what followed was a brutal massacre. Over the course of a single day, 111 inmates were killed, many of them unarmed. Survivors and human rights advocates later alleged that a large number of the deaths amounted to executions rather than attempts to restore order. The massacre drew international condemnation, spotlighting the urgent need for reform in Brazil's prison system. Despite promises of change, systemic issues like overcrowding, corruption, and violence persist in many facilities across the country. Though Carandiru Prison was demolished in 2002, its legacy lives on as a cautionary tale of what can happen when governments fail to prioritize humane prison conditions and reform. The site now hosts a park and a cultural center, but for many, it remains a symbol of the deadly consequences of neglect, institutional failure, and unchecked brutality. How can we ensure that such tragedies never happen again? The dire conditions of Zambia's Seaway Prison. Zambia's Seaway Prison is a harrowing example of the challenges facing many correctional facilities in the developing world. Severely overcrowded, the prison forces inmates to live in conditions that are not only inhumane, but also life-threatening. Cells designed to hold a few individuals are crammed with dozens, leaving inmates to sleep on the floor, often without any bedding. Poor ventilation and unsanitary conditions exacerbate the spread of diseases, turning the facility into a breeding ground for illness. Malnutrition is a constant struggle, as the prison system fails to provide inmates with adequate food, forcing many to survive on meager rations. Medical care is virtually non-existent, with illnesses like tuberculosis and malaria often going untreated. Inmates must rely on the rare charity of visiting organizations for even basic healthcare services. The lack of resources extends to hygiene as well, with limited access to clean water and insufficient facilities for bathing or sanitation. Survival in Seaway Prison is less about serving a sentence and more about enduring a relentless fight against hunger, disease, and despair. These dire conditions raise pressing questions about the purpose of incarceration. How can a system claim to rehabilitate individuals when it subjects them to such extreme suffering? Without significant reform and investment, Seaway Prison, and others like it, will continue to fail in its mission to promote justice and reintegration. The situation underscores the urgent need for global attention to prison reform, particularly in underfunded and neglected systems. The Audacious Escape of Michel Vaujour. Michel Vaujour's 1986 prison break stands as one of the most remarkable and cinematic escapes in modern history, capturing global attention for its sheer audacity and meticulous execution. A career criminal from France, Vaujour was serving a lengthy sentence for armed robbery and attempted murder. Determined to reclaim his freedom, he crafted a bold and elaborate escape plan with the unwavering support of his wife, Nadine Vaujour. Her commitment to the cause was extraordinary. Nadine took flying lessons and became proficient in piloting a helicopter, a skill she would use to liberate her husband from captivity. On the fateful day of the escape, Nadine rented a small helicopter under the guise of a routine flight. She piloted the aircraft to La Santé prison in Paris, where Michel had prepared for the breakout by climbing to the rooftop of the facility. The operation was executed with precision. As bewildered guards scrambled to react, Nadine skillfully maneuvered the helicopter to land on the roof, allowing Michel to board. Within moments, they were airborne, leaving the prison staff and onlookers stunned by the audacious rescue. The couple's daring escape captivated the media and public alike, becoming an instant sensation. Their ingenuity, resourcefulness, and fearlessness were widely discussed, with many marveling at the extent of Nadine's involvement. The story even inspired debates about the limits of love and loyalty and the extraordinary lengths people will go to for those they cherish. However, the couple's freedom was fleeting. A massive manhunt was launched, involving extensive surveillance and tips from the public. After a few months on the run, Michel was recaptured, bringing an end to his brief taste of liberty. Nadine, too, faced legal consequences for her pivotal role in the escape. Despite their eventual downfall, their story remains a cultural touchstone, symbolizing determination, love, and the ingenuity of the human spirit. The Vaujour's incredible jailbreak raises enduring questions about freedom, the risks people are willing to take to achieve it, and the personal sacrifices made in the name of love. Decades later, their tale continues to fascinate and inspire discussions about the intersection of creativity and desperation in the face of confinement. The Texas Seven's bold prison break. In December 2000, 7 inmates from the John B. Connolly Unit, a maximum security prison in Texas, executed one of the most daring and meticulously planned escapes in U.S. history. The group, later dubbed the Texas Seven, were serving time for various serious offenses, including armed robbery and murder. Using their combined skills, they orchestrated a bold plan to overpower correctional officers, seize weapons, and steal supplies. The escape began when the group took advantage of a lax security during a maintenance task. They subdued and tied up several prison staff, including guards and civilian workers, stealing their uniforms and identification badges to use as disguises. After obtaining firearms from the prison's armory and cutting phone lines to delay detection, the group fled in a stolen maintenance truck. Once outside the prison, they switched to another stolen vehicle and vanished, triggering a massive nationwide manhunt. During their time on the run, they committed a series of robberies, including the high-profile theft of cash and weapons from a sporting goods store. Tragically, their spree turned deadly when they murdered a police officer during a botched robbery. The escape and subsequent crime wave shocked the nation and exposed vulnerabilities in prison security. The fugitives were eventually tracked down in early 2001, thanks to tips from the public following their appearance on the television program America's Most Wanted. After a standoff with law enforcement, 6 of the men were captured, while one took his own life to avoid arrest. The Texas Seven's escape remains a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance, training, and secure protocols in high-security prisons. It also raises larger questions about the desperation that drives inmates to such extremes, and the systemic issues within correctional facilities that can lead to such audacious acts. These stories highlight the stark differences in prison systems around the world and the human resilience in the face of extreme adversity. What do you think? Should countries adopt more rehabilitative approaches like Norway's, or are tougher conditions necessary for justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thought-provoking content. See you in the next video.